Any single Democrat running today, and I may not be able to enumerate every single one of them right now, would be far better than the current occupants of the White House. So let's keep this in mind. And we can conduct ourselves in this way every single day for the next 11 months until voting begins here in Iowa. Let's remember that each one of us at the end of this, once we have a nominee, will be on the same team. It doesn't matter whose team you are on today. Doesn't matter which prospective nominee that you back right now. Ultimately, we all have to get on board the same person because it is fundamental to our chances of success that we defeat Donald Trump in 2020.
The most important thing you need to know about that clip is that it was a veritable striptease. The jacket came off next, then the coffee. I watched the whole thing. Then the sweater came off after a question about marijuana. This is, to me, one of the most interesting days in this campaign so far, Tim. We are joined now by Garrett, who is on the campaign trail in Iowa, and Alexi McCammon, who covers all things political and wise. And I want to start with you, Garrett. What did you see this morning in that room? I mean, I think that he is, if nothing else, going to be interesting to cover. I was jealous of all of you out there today.
Yeah, look, Beto O'Rourke still has it, whatever it is. He's charismatic. He knows how to get the crowd going. He had them eating out of his hand. He's never set foot in the state of Iowa before. Everybody I talked to was seeing him for the first time. They sort of knew about him as that guy who almost beat Ted Cruz, but every Iowan I talked to came away impressed. I think what's going to be interesting is how this develops over the next 6, 7, 8 months, however long Beto O'Rourke ends up being in this race, is where does he go from here? You know, a lot of what he did today was listening. He would invite people to ask questions. He would talk about things that he thought were good ideas. He would say, oh, you know, that's something that deserves more discussion, or that's something that we should really be talking about in Washington. But what he didn't do is show up with his own big ideas about how to do anything as president. And every Iowan I talked to was willing to cut him some slack for that. This is day one. But how does he develop from being a guy who can be inspiring to a crowd to being someone who folks can legitimately see as a president of the United States who could lead a Democratic Party? That's not something he was even talking about when he ran for Senate. You know, he sort of turned his back on Democrats as a party and ran his race. This is a whole different animal now.
Garrett, let me just challenge some of that a little bit. The old political advisor in me is rearing its ugly head, and I warn you, it is ugly. My advice to someone right now trying to stand out in the field would be to listen. I mean, isn't there a role in this field of 7,000 to simply go to Iowa and listen?
Absolutely. And when you think about what Beto O'Rourke's lane might be, and I'm not one who really subscribes to that theory necessarily, but part of what he brings to the table is potentially an idea to sell progressive ideas to people who might be turned off by Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or some of these other candidates for whatever reason. He can be a more optimistic, less divisive messenger in redder states. And so setting a baseline, if I want to listen to you and make these your ideas, give the people who would be voting for him the same level of ownership, does make a certain degree of sense. Again, the question to me is, where does he go from there? How does he build on that over however long he's in this campaign?
Alexi.
It's definitely an exciting time. I think Beto O'Rourke is a really interesting person to me for a lot of reasons. Something that people are latching onto right now is this idea that he has this aversion to labels. He's not calling himself a progressive. But as Garrett just mentioned, I think there's an opportunity for him to sort of sell these progressive ideas and policies to people after listening to them, of course, in his first time in Iowa, in a way that could attract voters who are maybe not necessarily down with this democratic socialist movement that they see happening or perceive to be happening at the national level. The other interesting thing, though, is that if Democratic primary voters want someone to fight against Trump and everything that he stands for and has created in this current political moment, do they want someone, are they feeling fired up by someone who is saying, well, let's all unite together, I'm going to unite the country, let's come together? I think there's room for him to make that argument on both sides, but it's going to be interesting to see how people take to someone like him and his message compared to someone like Kamala Harris, who is very much ready to fight tooth and nail, or Elizabeth Warren to fight tooth and nail against Donald Trump and everything he's created.
So I know what you're saying. I didn't hear him say we won't fight. What I heard him say is we won't eat each other. We're going to save the eating for the opponent. I mean, I didn't hear any and I sat and watched his whole event this morning. I was riveted by the striptease because I'm like, wow, he's and then off came the jacket. I'm not being pervy. I'm just saying, like, off came the jacket, then off came, and you really saw him warm up. And listen, I've worked in politics a lot longer than I've worked in television, and Garrett said it at the beginning. He has it. Now, whether it is enough, I think at this moment he has the most raw political talent in the field. Whether that gets him beyond tomorrow is who knows. But I sort of would challenge the idea that they didn't display fight. He just made clear that he's going to save it for Trump.
Well, it's also just a different type of fighting, right? And I don't think you have to say the word fight to know that he's going to fight against Donald Trump. I mean, I think running as a Democratic candidate for president, you are inevitably fighting against Trump in some way or another. But I think he does bring something really unique.
His own Justice Department is fighting against him and more. I mean,
yes,
right?
Yes, that's
Everyone's
exactly
fighting
right.
with him.
Yes, but I think he does bring something unique. And, you know, this idea or the criticism that, well, we know him because he lost his Senate race. $80 million that he raised for that Senate campaign, $20 million of that came from out of Texas. That suggests this national appeal that he started growing in those 2 years he was running for Senate in Texas that is only going to continue moving forward. And, you know, his name ID is maybe not great in places like Iowa where he's never been, or Wisconsin where I just was on Monday, and people literally did not know who he was when we showed a photo of him. And then we were like, it's Beto O'Rourke. And they're like, Texas? And it's like, yeah, you'll get there, right? But it's early, and he's making people feel something, and I think that feeling will stick a lot longer than here's X, Y, and Z policy that I have.
That's exactly
that's right.
Because we vote for the candidate who makes us feel like what we want to feel like. I mean, part of the problem of the way politics has been covered, and I've been on both sides of it, is we analyze one Democratic candidate's medical plan versus another Democratic medical plan. Nobody really votes on that. There was so much interesting stuff written during the 2016 campaign about Trump's appeal to the authoritarian voter, which is a fear-based appeal. It alarms people. It gets them out to the polls. What Beto is doing is the opposite of a fear-based appeal. It's a hope-based appeal, and that makes voters feel like, maybe that's someone I want. But that will be the acid test. Is the hope versus fear dynamic? Because Trump will campaign on fear, and a Democrat has to campaign on hope.
I think that is so spot on, because as you pointed to, Beto O'Rourke is interesting to watch. Donald Trump is also interesting to watch, but they're interesting to watch for very different reasons. We watch Donald Trump the way you might watch someone on a ledge at the corner of a high rise and wondering whether or not they're going to jump, or a guy in a car driving towards a wall. Will he crash the car? And it's fascinating and scary to watch that happening. People are watching Beto O'Rourke because he's talking.
Like a diagnosis.
It is, but no, not you. I know that you're not behind the wheel. I think people watch Beto O'Rourke, and
not just for the striptease.
Not just for the striptease, except for Nicole. But because he's a younger version of Joe Biden. He is full of energy. He's positive. He's speaking to the things that Rick just mentioned. Unity, moving forward as a community. So people are fascinated by him for healthier reasons than we're fascinated by Donald Trump, and that's important for the country.
Let me show you what Donald Trump said.
Well, I think he's got a lot of hand movement. I've never seen so much hand movement. I said, is he crazy, or is that just the way he acts? So I've never seen hand movement. I watched him a little while this morning doing, I assume it was some kind of a news conference, and I've actually never seen anything quite like it. Study it. I'm sure you'll agree.
Someone studied it, Garrett. Me thinks he doth protesteth too much. Garrett?
Beto O'Rourke conducts an orchestra with his hands while he speaks. He is a very specific speaking style. I found myself doing live shots in the Beto O'Rourke speaking style by the time I got out of Texas after the midterm campaign. He's highly caffeinated, highly energetic guy. And look, if that's what it takes to, get people to recognize who he is, I suppose the O'Rourke people would probably be perfectly happy with that. And if that's the worst that Donald Trump can bring against him on day one, I think they'd be pretty happy with that too.
Garrett, we're so glad you're out there. I hope you stay out on the trail. I love talking to you out there.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.